Greetings and salutations, creature lovers. This is Mr. Venom welcoming you to episode 39 of No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts. Let me go ahead and introduce my cohorts. Coming to us from the Horror Countdown podcast and Fresh Cuts, it is Mr. Don Anelli. How you doing, Don?
Hey, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
And coming to us from the main show, No More Room in Hell, it is Mr. Derek B. How you doing, Derek?
Hey, yo. We got to talk about the fisherman.
Yeah, we don't get to talk about Ramon the alligator this week, but we get to talk about fishermen with wives that are way too attractive for them and fish that are just a little too ornery for their own good. So, of course, folks, we are talking about Humanoids from the Deep, coming to us from 1980.
Humanoids from the Deep. They began in the water. They're not human, but they hunt human women. Not for killing, for mating.
Why the girls?
It's my theory that these creatures are driven to mate with man now in order to further develop their incredible evolution.
Humanoids from the deep. Anywhere you run, any place you hide, any time you stop, they will find you. Humanoids from the deep.
This movie actually has two directors, which we'll have a short story about later on. So our credited directors are Barbara Peters and Jimmy Murakami. Our writers for the film are Martin Cohen, William Martin, and Frank Arnold, starring the great Vic Morrow, Doug McClure, and Ann Turkel. This one actually has an uncredited producer of Roger Corman. Yes, this is technically a Roger Corman movie. At the time of its release, he did not put his name on the credits or anything like that, so it was kind of an uncredited liner note. But now, obviously, years later, we know this is solidly a Roger Corman movie. In fact, I watched about a half dozen Roger Corman interviews specifically about this movie in preparation for this episode. So this should be a fun one. Like I said, my friends, Humanoids from the Deep, 1980, released on May 16th. It is coming in at 1 hour and 19 minutes. It is rated R. Our synopsis is as follows. Humanoid sea creatures start killing a fishing town's residents and raping their women. It's up to the townsfolk and a visiting biologist to fight back and fend them off. So, this was actually my pick, believe it or not. Yes, it was my turn to pick, and this was a movie that I've loved this movie since the early 80s. It's just something that I found endlessly fun. But in doing my research for this episode, I actually found a lot more facts and little, factoids that I didn't know about. So I actually got to learn a little bit about this one. And that's just from independent research because unfortunately I do not have the 4K. So I do not have that plethora of special features to delve into. So hopefully at least one of our co-hosts has that 4K and might be able to talk a little bit about some features on there. Yeah, let's go ahead and start with our general thoughts on Humanoids from the Deep. You just heard the trailer, so and the trailer doesn't do this movie any justice once we start talking about it. Folks, if you have not experienced Humanoids from the Deep, you are in for a treat. So let's go ahead and bring Derek in here because I got a feeling Derek's going to have some fun with this one. Derek, give me some general thoughts on Humanoids from the Deep.
Where do I begin?
Really?
Let's start with I feel like in Doug McClure's contract for every movie, he has to have like a hot woman. Yeah, man, rewatching this and just realizing like how much older Doug McClure is looking than his wife, especially in that 4K.
Yep.
It's like, whoa. And Vic Morrow. Vic Morrow's wife's even fucking a dime piece for Vic Morrow for that era, This is it's fucking crazy. This is like 2 years before like that happened to him, It's insane that how many movies this guy's done before that terrible incident that happened during Twilight Zone.
Yep.
That's for another show, so we won't dwell much into that. But there's some big, like Ann Turkel's in this movie. She's the biologist. She's pretty great. And then the main standout for me of this movie is Rob Bottin's special effects, like the fishmen themselves look fucking awesome. I love the look of them, and like the effects in general are great. Like, ironically enough, I watched like The Thing and Total Recall in the same fucking week. He did all the effects for those movies, and it's kind of like a growing process. You watch Humanoids from the Deep, you did early effects, and then like The Thing is like the big standout effect movie for him, and then Total Recall is like this big high budget like sci-fi action movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where it's creepy because he even made like puppets of Arnold Schwarzenegger for that movie. Weird. Yeah, and then you got like this crazy great like it's kind of a rifty score, but it's like it borrows from a lot, but it's done by James Horner, which was odd because all I'm thinking about this is from the same guy who did Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the same like composer and shit. Like it's nuts when you think about it in that general. But man, when the fish people start getting down and dirty, I'm like, this turns into like a different type of movie. I'm like, should I be watching this right now? It's like you know what I mean? It's like I'm like, what the hell? But if you know the history of this movie, they actually go into it in some of the special features that are on the Shout Factory 4K. And actually, I own the old Shout Factory Blu-ray, which actually has a few of the same special features. They do delve into like the history of the making of this movie, where was Roger Corman's like, oh, it doesn't have enough tits and ass in it, so I'm gonna add these scenes in it. Like even like. I think one of the actors that played like Doug McClure's like wife, she even has like a scene where they show like her tits, and I guess it's not even her tits.
Yeah.
And she like reacted like later and like when she saw the movie, like, yeah, that's not me. But yeah, I love like the atmosphere of this movie too. It has a great like fake like New England setting, even though it's like shot in California. Like, they actually do kind of a good job of like blending some of like the rural like sense of it all, even though in that sense where it's not really that area in that sense. But other than that, I have a blast with this movie. Is it a fucking like 10 out of 10 masterpiece? I don't know, but I fucking love it for what it is. It's a piece of like 80s nostalgia, good enough stuff.
Absolutely. All right, Don, why don't you come on in here, give us some general thoughts on Humanoids from the Deep.
Yeah, it's I can't say like like what Derek said that it's one of the all time goats of the genre, but it's just a blast if you just sit down and want to watch something goofy and silly and a little sleazy here and there. Um, yeah, it's not a very deep watch. It's not a very intellectual movie. It does what it needs to do. It introduces the threat, it introduces where they came from, it introduces what they're after, and it pretty much just goes from there. And yeah, it's a fun time. The creatures look great, the special effects are worthwhile, the gore is great. Some of it is, obviously inserts. They're not done at the same time. You can, tell that they were done to, spice the film up. The nudity is great. You can again tell that it was done to spice things up. Knowing the backstory and what was going on with all that and why that they were included, it makes sense. You can obviously tell, but it brings the experience together in a fun way. It just it doesn't detract from anything, but it ends up and brings everything together, and it makes for that much more enjoyable of an experience when you see all the the old school monster effects, the more modern gore, the more modern nudity, and it just makes for a much more cohesive experience where it has the throwback feel, but it still has the the grindhouse exploitation kind of qualities. And yeah, it's a fun zip in, zip out, barely an hour and 20 minutes. It's just a fun film. I mean, again, it's not the, most, you know, layered. It's the most symbolic. It's, fish creatures raping women and the townsmen trying to stop them from spreading. And, yeah, it's just a, fun ride. It's a fun, it's not necessarily like the greatest, but it's still a very enjoyable time. You don't really need to think much about it. It's just something that you throw on, you zone out, you zone in more when there's tits or gore on screen. But for everything else, yeah, if you see it once or twice, you can pretty much get what you need out of it, and it's like a comfort watch movie.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with you that this is a comfort food movie. This is definitely something this is up there for me with, something like a Return of the Living Dead or even Full Cheese Zombie, something that I can put on, I don't have to pay attention to. I'll lift up my eyes every now and again when I hear screaming and, get to see a cool piece of practical effects or a cool creature, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I'm pretty much right there in step with both Don and Derek. I love this movie. This is just like with Derek, I'm not going to say that this is a 10 out of 10, masterpiece, not by any stretch of the imagination. I will say that this is potentially one of the greatest B movies ever made, though. Like, this might be the king of the B movies. And considering that the man that has the title, the king of the B movies, is the producer of this one, I guess it kind of fits. I would have said Piranha would be the king of the B movies, but I think Piranha takes that extra little step to actually be slightly more than just like a Saturday afternoon, creature feature, monster flick, whatever you want to go with. Humanoids from the Deep knows what it is. It is solidly a sleazy creature feature with lots of nudity, lots of gratuitous, rape scenes. Well, maybe not gratuitous rape scenes. I mean, it's not like we actually get to see, fish penis penetrating human women, not by any stretch. And thank God, because I definitely would not
just
be
the fucking noises it fucking makes is fucking
just the the slurping and the oozing and oh my God, yeah, it's definitely interesting. Obviously, great creature effects, despite the fact that one little bit of the trivia that some people may not know is that they only had one full costume for this movie. There is only one full top to bottom humanoid from the deep outfit. There's two. Yeah, there's two more partial outfits that they use that they only shot from certain angles. That's why when you watch the movie, despite this being somewhat of a horde film, you don't ever get to see more than 3 of the humanoids on screen at once. And when you do see those 3, 2 of them have their back facing the camera. So, obviously Roger is the king of working with a small budget. He had the suits made that he could afford, and they did what they could with it. So I mean, I think they did a pretty good job of showing a siege, especially during that final scene during the salmon festival on the pier when they're all coming out from under the pier and everything. There's literally only 3 suits in total, and like I said, 2 of them can't even really be shot from the front. They were like partial suits. So when you really think about that, it makes some of these scenes really impressive. The scene where they get to the nest is a lot more impressive when you think about that. And then, like I said, the Salmon Festival siege itself is also pretty damn impressive. So one thing that I have to say, and I gotta say it, that this movie does incredibly poorly, and it's about the only thing that I'm going to really knock this movie for, and that's its editing. This movie is incredibly poorly edited, and there is a reason for that, of course, which we'll talk about quickly now. As we've already kind of alluded to, this movie had 2 different directors. This movie started with Barbara Peters as the director. Very unusual for a woman to be, filming a movie like this in 1980. Well, there's a reason for that. The movie that she shot was not Humanoids from the Deep. Barbara Peters shot a gritty, hard-hitting look at the environment and the effects of the environment on indigenous creatures, kind of like Prophecy, where, we did Prophecy here a few episodes ago, which was the first movie, one of the first movies that we talked about that had mutations in it, mutated animals. And now here we are again with more mutated animals just a few years later. So
just a year later, actually.
yeah, just a year later. So exactly. So that element of it is obviously really interesting for the time period, because it seemed like with the 50s, the nuclear monster was like big in the horror genre, and then it took a little bit of a nosedive in the 60s and 70s. But then in the 80s, it seemed like the mutated monster, maybe not the nuclear monster, but at least the mutated monster definitely starts making a comeback in the late 70s, early 80s. So like I said, I can't say enough good things about this movie. Yes, it's cheesy. I'm sorry, I stopped my story right in the middle and went off on yet another tangent. Anyway, sorry about that, folks. So like I said, Roger Corman hired Barbara Peters to direct this movie. He wanted to take the chance on a female director because he thought he liked the work that she had been doing as a second unit director on some of his other projects, so he gave her the opportunity. Now, the movie that Barbara Peters shot wasn't even called Humanoids from the Deep. It was called Beneath the Surface. The Darkness, excuse me. Beneath the Darkness was the name of the original title. And like I said, that movie was meant to be more of a hard-hitting look at the environment and how it's affecting, creatures in said environment. When the movie was done, one of the other producers spoke to Roger and said, "Hey, have you actually watched the movie? I think we have a little bit of a problem here. Like this thing doesn't really come off like a Roger Corman movie."
It's probably Jim Warnarski.
I wouldn't be surprised, actually, potentially. So after Roger watched Barbara's final cut, he agreed with this producer and said, yeah, we definitely need more exploitation elements, more nudity. The gore was fine, because what's funny is that Barbara Peters, I don't know, I don't want to call her a man hater because I don't know her, but she shot all of these gnarly death scenes for the men in the movie. But then when she shot her versions of the rape scenes, they were all done in silhouette or in shadow. Like nothing was done on screen. You never actually saw a humanoid on top of a human woman in Barbara Peters' version. Obviously, Corman didn't like it, so then he went and got the second unit director, Jimmy Murakami, to basically secretly film these scenes. Now, when Barbara Peters caught wind of this, she wasn't very happy about it. But Roger basically said, listen, when Jimmy's done filming these scenes, I'll let you, kind of have final say on them, if you like them, if you don't like them, stuff like that. Well, Roger kind of went back on that promise, did not end up sharing the footage with her. And ultimately, Barbara Peters and all of the actors in the film didn't see this movie until its premiere, like didn't know that it was going to be nearly as sleazy with as much nudity and fish rape as they thought was going to be in it. So it was a total shock for almost everyone involved. Like, and Ann Turkle, like Derek kind of alluded to earlier, that shower scene with Ann Turkle near the end of the film is absolutely not her. But what's funny is that she actually makes the comment of, yeah, they got some actress with a rockin' body to play me in the shower. So she actually was mildly okay with it, because the woman that they got, her body was that much better than hers. And she's like, well, now everybody thinks that I'm built like that woman. So rock on. That's awesome. So it's kind of funny little story that she was okay with the body double. But yeah, like I said, Jimmy Murakami shot all the extra scenes. They were spliced into the movie without Barbara Peters' acknowledgement. When she saw the final product on the premiere, the day of the premiere, she actually wanted her name off the title. She basically said, get my name off the movie. I want it completely off. Let Jimmy have the credit for director. Well, unfortunately, since the movie had already premiered, like it already had its like official world premiere, it was going to cost an excessive amount of money to change the credits. Roger Corman made a deal with Barbara, basically saying, look, if you want your name off this movie, you're going to have to pay for the credits to be remade. Barbara refused, hence why she still to this day gets credit for this movie. Now, for years and years, for 20, 30 years after this movie, Barbara always refused to talk about it. She didn't want to acknowledge it. She just was always upset about it. But very recently, like within the last 10 years, she was actually asked about it once again. And she actually changed her answer finally for the first time in over 30 years. She actually said, you know what? Despite the fact that I didn't agree with a lot of the changes that were made, it did make the movie a fun little movie. The movie that she originally made, like I said, was going to be a little bit more hard-hitting, a little bit grittier, more on the environmental aspect of it, less on the grindhouse aspect of it. But she at least now today can admit that it is a fun movie and that this version is much more quote unquote fun than the version that she made. So it is nice to see her kind of warm up to it. I'm sure inside she's still seething about it. Obviously all the changes that were made to her movie. I would love to see her movie. I know it probably wouldn't make hardcore creature feature fans as happy, but I myself kind of like hard hitting, kind of dramatic horror like that. I'm sure Don knows that very well from working with me on Fresh Cuts. I tend to like, kind of trauma porn, as we call it on Fresh Cuts and stuff like that. So I definitely would love to see Beneath the Darkness. I'm sure there's no cut of it available anywhere. I'm sure, that hit a cutting room floor back in 1979. So that's gone forever.
I'm pretty sure you could do that. All you'd have to do is just remove all the fish rape scenes.
Right. But they actually removed some of her scenes too, because her movie was going to have a lot more environmental stuff in it, like more scenes with Ann Turkle, more scenes with Turkle doing investigation, like lab work and blah, 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 blah. So they actually did cut out some of her stuff. That's the stuff I'm talking about. Like, okay. Yeah, you can leave the fish rape in there. I just would like to see the complete version, because ultimately this movie is only an hour and 19 minutes long, which I know that's something that Roger Corman always demanded of his directors. All our movies have to be 75 to 80 minutes long. I would have loved to have just seen a 90-minute version of this where they maybe leaned a little bit heavier into the whole environmental aspect of it, kind of like The Prophecy does, because The Prophecy, I thought, did a really good job of talking up the environmental stuff, but without being like preachy about it or kind of slapping you in the face constantly with, white people are bad and natives are good. And this movie, we get more Native American hate in this one, just like in Prophecy. Kind of interesting. Yeah. Even though our Native American is actually a Mexican actor, but we'll forgive him. It's 1970s and 80s.
It's a little bit
cinema.
closer to Namar Asante. Let's just put it that way.
Oh no, I'll go with that, or even closer than the Asian Native Americans from Cannibal the Musical, but that's a story for another show. So yeah, obviously Native representation still up to 1980 was just not what it needed to be, but I will say that the actor who played Johnny Eagle did a great job.
Yeah, I loved him.
Yeah. Despite, like I said, there's so many continuity errors with this movie. Like the black eye, Johnny's black eye. Did you notice how it was constantly changing shape and size throughout the movie after he got his ass kicked in that bar scene? Like sometimes his eye would be like swollen shut, sometimes it would be open, sometimes the black eye would be gigantic, sometimes it would be small, like just around the iris or around the main part of the eye. Like it was just constantly changing shape. This is what this kind of leads back to my original comment about the editing in this movie, because they reshot a bunch of scenes, a bunch of rape scenes, and then cut out other stuff. There's a lot of errors in this movie, like that.
Yeah, like Doug McClure has a baby, like and the kid. And I didn't even realize that the kid that was with him was supposed to be like his brother. I'm like, it looks like he could be his fucking son.
Well, I mean, hey, that whole relationship was confusing because his wife looks like his daughter. His son looks like his grandkid, or not his son, his brother looks like his grandkid. It's so goddamn confusing. But like I said, so many continuity errors. Like there's a scene where a girl, after Johnny Eagle's house is torched by Vic Morrow's character, the girlfriend grabs Johnny's pickup truck to drive back into town to get help. One of the humanoids smashes the windshield, like smashes a giant hole in the windshield. Literally, she hits the brakes. The humanoid rolls off. She runs it over and continues driving. Suddenly, the windshield is intact. There's no hole. They
reused that in like Mad Roger Corman movies too.
Right, that's right. We talked about that on previous episodes, where some of the reusing of shots in Corman movies. Yeah, but yeah, some of the continuity errors here are kind of silly, but some are kind of cool. Like some of the behind the scenes stuff is kind of cool. Every single time a humanoid gets shot in the movie, that's actually special effects artist Steve Johnson in the costume. Apparently Barbara Peters and Jimmy Murakami were both big fans of how he reacted when he got shot. Like of all the people that were hired to wear the suits, they liked his reaction the best. So every time a humanoid gets shot, that's Steve Johnson, who was basically on Rob Boutine's special effects team. And yes, we haven't even talked about that yet. Fucking Rob Boutine, the man who gave us The Thing, busts out with this movie. Derek mentioned it briefly, but my God, when I first saw, like, I didn't even realize Boutine did this until very recently, until only the last few years. I remember seeing
a year before The Howling too, before The Howling.
Exactly, before his big star turn. Exactly. So I mean, oh my God, just so much cred on this. Like I said, Steve Johnson is on the team. I mean, so there's so much great about this movie that it kind of gets lost in the sleaziness and the kind of grindhouse aspect of it. But these are some spectacular effects. There's a character in this movie named Jerry, which I always love because for some reason Jerrys are always assholes. They're one of two things. They're either assholes or idiots, like they're dumb as shit, or they're womanizing douchebags, like Jerry from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This Jerry in this movie was kind of an idiot, just kind of a goofball, but the scar on his face, like the wound, was so badass looking. That was one of the coolest effects in this movie, was just his the facial scar after that humanoid slashed at his face. I thought that looked so good.
Yo, the first victim of this movie is a kid.
Like, yeah, that's true. That's pretty solid. Yeah. We don't get to see it, sadly. It is off screen, but yeah, you are correct.
Things like that whole fishing boat.
Oh yeah, that explosion was great. That opening scene there with that fishing boat was pretty goddamn cool. Yeah, I got to say, some decent explosions, though. I will say, I don't think Molotov cocktails explode, but in this movie, a Molotov cocktail explodes, but whatever. It's like they threw a grenade inside of the cocktail or something. Like Molotov cocktails are meant to spread fire. They don't explode, like literally, it's almost like they threw it at like a tank of gas, which, who knows? Maybe Johnny Eagle had like some natural gas.
Imagine if that happened in Sinners. The Molotov explosion.
Oh, damn. Too much. But so, yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of elements of this movie to like, only one or two things to not like. Like I said, because of the reshot scenes, because of the scenes that got taken out, the editing in this movie is fairly poor. There's a lot of continuity errors. Obviously, it's a low budget 1980, creature feature. So obviously we're going to be pretty forgiving of stuff like that. I'm not judging this like I would judge The Godfather or something, of that ilk by any stretch. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into the story. It's pretty simple. I don't know that a true walkthrough is in order. Basically we've got creatures that are coming out of the ocean in this town of Noyo. Weird name for a town too, Noyo. Noyo is the name of the town.
Yeah, Native American. That's probably what they're trying to go with.
So yeah, like I said, this small town basically starts getting inundated with creatures that are coming out of the ocean. Early in the film, we're introduced to Ann Turkel's character, Susan Drake, who is a scientist. She talks about how her and her team are working on helping the fishing in this area by working on a chemical that'll make salmon grow faster and bigger so that the fishing industry and the planned cannery that's coming to the town can thrive. Obviously, Johnny Eagle and his Native American family don't want the cannery here because of what it's going to do to the environment, the dumping, the pollution, stuff like that. Very similar to The Prophecy, The attacks come slow at first. Obviously, Roger Corman is the kind of guy that likes to pepper the audience with shots of the creature rather than seeing the creature in all its glory right at the beginning, a la Godzilla -1. Roger Corman likes to just give little tastes of the creature. So it's a solid half hour in this hour and 20-minute movie before we see the first full shot of a creature. In the opening scene, when the boat explodes, we'll see like a hand pulling at like a fishing net, but no full shot of the creature until about the half-hour mark, which is also the first rape scene of the movie, where basically a cute blonde, after her boyfriend Jerry is taken out, we see one of the humanoids basically lay on top of her. Like I said, the rape scenes are very oddly done here because there's not even any thrusting. You know what I mean? It's like all we really see is a humanoid kind of just uncoordinatedly fall on top of a woman. Her legs end up spreading, and then that's it. Like I said, there's no thrusting, there's no fish penis. So thankfully, it's somewhat tasteful, despite the plethora of bare breasts in the movie, which, by the way, some impressive breasts in this movie.
Yes.
70s breasts aren't usually this impressive. So kudos to whoever did the casting here. I know I'm being a pig. I apologize to our female listeners, but for a movie shot in 1979, there's some impressive breasts in this one. So yeah, kudos. Anyway, after the attacks, Vic Morrow's character thinks that it's the Native Americans attacking white people to stop the cannery from opening. So there is a scene where Vic Morrow and his goons beat up on Johnny Eagle. Hence the constantly changing black eye throughout the rest of the movie after that scene. Like, folks, next time you watch Humanoids from the Deep, pay close attention to Johnny Eagle's black eye. It's changing size all through the movie. It's amazing.
It's like the Loomis fucking scar in Halloween 4.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. It's probably worse, actually, because it's just so all over the place. But eventually, creatures start attacking more publicly, with eventually they attack the Salmon Festival. I'm kind of skipping ahead, obviously. There's a lot of horror set pieces throughout, stalking scenes, women getting attacked.
Ventriloquist.
And then the ventriloquist kill. And that's actually, no, that's not Jerry. That was after Jerry. Yeah, the second kill and rape scene is basically a couple that's in a tent on the beach one of the humanoids basically kills the guy, slashes at his back, leaving another gnarly ass wound. And then the girl is already butt naked. She is butt ass naked because obviously she was about to have sex with her boyfriend. And we get a little bit of a chase scene where the humanoid is kind of chasing her, running away from these humanoids. Eventually she gets caught. We get, like I said, the very short rape scene. Now, what's funny about this movie is that they don't really tell you if these women are surviving these rapes. Because every time a woman gets raped, they disappear. Like, we don't see them again. So I think like the people in the movie, like Vic Morrow's character and the mayor and the sheriff, like they all assume that these people are missing, died, they got dragged out by the ocean, whatever the case may be, they ran away, whatever. So yeah, like the first time you watch it, you're just like, what is happening? Like, are these women all dying? And if they are dying, what's the point of raping them? Like, you're not actually going to get any children out of them. But then eventually we do get a scene where the Dr. Drake, Doug McClure, Jim Hill, our hero, and Jim's younger brother end up finding, and Johnny Eagle, excuse me, end up finding the quote unquote nest. It's basically like a cave system near the shore of this town. They go in there, they end up finding multiple humanoids, end up having a little bit of a battle. They end up killing like maybe 3 or 4 of them with their rifle. And then eventually they find one of the girls that was raped and she is alive. What's interesting is that the humanoids actually bury their women, not with the intent of killing them, like burying them alive, but I don't know if it's meant to keep them warm or what. Like maybe it's an animalistic instinct where you want to keep the incubating babies warm. So yeah, the women are actually buried not very far, like only a couple of inches under the sand. So they won't die, like they won't suffocate. There'll be enough oxygen going through the wet sand for them to survive, but it's almost like it's keeping them incapacitated until their children are born. They're humanoid hybrids, if you will. After they find the nest and the scientist goes back to the town to let them know that, and they actually bring back one of the dead creatures, because obviously, you get the skepticism scenes, the general, oh, you're crazy. What? Sea monsters? What are you talking about? Blah, 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 blah. After they find the nest, they actually bring back one of the dead creatures. And this is in the middle of the salmon festival. Literally, the salmon festival is taking place on the pier, which, by the way, the salmon festival was shot in Malibu. I actually know the pier that it was shot on, so it's kind of interesting. When I saw on IMDb that it was shot in Malibu, I'm like, I know where that is. I got a friend who keeps a boat in that exact same pier, so I literally know exactly where they shot that scene. Pretty interesting. During the salmon festival, there's just an all-out attack. Like basically, it's actually pretty cool. It's very similar to Ramon the alligator in 1980s, the Alligator, the movie, when he kind of pops out from the street. When he pops out of the sidewalk from the concrete. We get almost the exact same thing here with one of the creatures coming out of the pier. So instead of concrete, they're going through the wooden planks of the pier. But yeah, like 3 or 4 of them pop out, and that just starts the siege. And my God, one of the things that was really, really annoying me about this scene is that for the first half of the scene, like let's say this entire scene was 10 minutes. I don't know that it actually was, but I'm just using it as an example. Let's say the entire siege on the pier was 10 minutes long. For the first 5 minutes, all you have are people running around like crazy. Nobody's helping each other. Nobody's attacking any of the creatures. They're literally just like chickens with their heads cut off, just running around. By the way, did you notice that the scream track kept getting looped every 10 seconds? They only had 10 seconds of screaming, so they just looped it over and over again throughout the entire siege on the pier. I'm an audio engineer, folks, so I noticed stuff like that right away. Yeah. And then I got confirmation online that is exactly what happened. So,
okay, yeah. I didn't know how long it was, but yeah, you can tell pretty easily that it is. I mean, I didn't know how long the loop was, but okay.
Yeah, I think it was around 10 seconds. I didn't actually count, but just based on how many times they looped it, it felt like it was around 10 seconds long. But like I said, then I looked it up and I found that, yes, that is correct. It was a 10-second loop of screaming that they just looped over and over again. So like I said, on first watch, you probably won't notice. But I, being an audio engineer by degree, I have a degree in audio production. I just noticed those kind of things right away. So I found it kind of funny. Basically, what ends up happening is Dr. Drake and Jim Hill, our heroes, decide to set the whole place on fire. Not the pier, but the water, which realistically, it doesn't make sense because these are underwater creatures. If the surface of the water's on fire, all they got to do is go underwater and they escape the fire. Boom, done. But in this movie, unfortunately, the creatures are a little stupid. Once they set the bay on fire, a bunch of the creatures kind of come out of the water, like voluntarily letting themselves getting burned. Again, because of the lack of suits and creature actors in the movie, they kind of have to shoot it in a way that, is making it look like there's a lot more creatures there, which, like I said, this scene kind of suffers because of it, because they show a lot of shots of the bay burning, but no actual creatures burning. And it's like, why are you showing me this? Like, you have to kind of do a little bit of mental gymnastics to figure out what they're implying, that the creatures are actually burning on the surface, even though we don't see any. So, and then while this is happening, while the siege at the Salmon Festival is happening, Jim Hill's wife, Carol, played by Cindy Weintraub, is attacked at her house. And there's at least 2 humanoids there. Now, what she ends up defending herself actually pretty impressively. I'm going to say that the most impressive defending themselves is the Salmon Queen. Like, at the Salmon Festival, there's a DJ booth, and the DJ has with him the Salmon Queen. She's the girl who's, the representative, the cute representative of the Salmon Festival for the year. Well, when she starts talking, she just comes off as this bubbly, young, kind of idiotic girl. But then when she gets attacked by one of the humanoids, she picks up a rock and beats the fuck out of it. Like, she's literally hitting it in the head with this rock until its brain is exposed. I literally stood up and applauded today in my living room. I'm like, that was fucking impressive. This tiny little bubbly, vapid girl is tougher than Vic Morrow, tougher than Doug McClure. It's like, what the fuck? And then it seems like right after the Salmon Queen kills one of them, it seems like then the rest of the town is like, oh, these things can be killed fairly easily, because even though these things are strong, they're soft. Like, their heads are soft. Like, you could basically hit them once or twice with a 2x4 and their brain is exposed instantly. Like, they don't have a skull. It's almost like they have an exoskeleton. But yeah, their heads are soft. And it's like, once the Salmon Queen kills one, then you see all the townsfolk. And then we see a scene where the townsfolk actually surround one of them and then attack them. The one good suit, the one creature that had a good suit that they could actually show from every angle. They show the townsfolk kind of surround them and then beat the shit out of them.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually the sun comes up and that's it. Everyone seems to be okay, thinking that they got them all, which I'm thinking that's absolute BS. There's no way in hell that they killed every single creature. Because don't forget, 2 of them were at Carol's house, at the Hills house. Maybe there were more there that never got a chance to go inside to attack her. Maybe there were more on the way. Maybe they have some kind of hive mind mentality where, when one goes to attack something, a couple more will join them, kind of like a werewolf mentality too. Mm-hmm. So like there's just so many holes in this. Like in my opinion, there's absolutely no way they killed every single one of the creatures. No way. Like, I would not be surprised if in the world of that movie, the next day there was another attack, another siege with multiple creatures going out and attacking people. But like I said, the sun comes up, everybody is calm, everybody seems to be confident in the fact that they killed them all, and then we get our final scene, and it's the final scene.
It's a boy.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who saw this movie on first watch expected this ending. This is like the only ending a movie like this can have. We end up seeing Peggy, one of the girls that was raped, and she was the one that was saved. She was the one that they found in the nest, and they dug her up and brought her back to civilization. Well, we see her in the hospital giving birth. Basically, it seems like she's going to have a normal birth. Like the doctor is telling her, push, go ahead and push. But eventually, this thing just tears out of her belly. It does not come through, her vagina as expected. It literally tears through her belly. And we've got a humanoid hybrid with like a fucked up, twisted mouth. And he's yeah, I'm not even sure if that was a cry or what the hell he did, but yeah. And then our movie fades to black, and that's it. Now, there was a planned sequel for this movie that was supposed to come out in 1991. It ended up getting scrapped. And you know what? I think I'm okay with that because in that script, the humanoids talked. I don't know how I feel about the humanoids actually speaking. Or if they would have spoken in the sequel, that irks me. And then, of course, there was a TV movie. I think a TV version of this that was made in 96, I want to say. It was so tame that nobody really liked it. Nobody even really associates it with the original because, like I said, it's a TV movie. So obviously you got to tone down the kills. You got to tone down the rape. Like the basic storyline was the same, but it was just so tame that nobody really liked it. I actually didn't see it, so I can't really speak on it.
I didn't see it either.
I've seen it once. It's kind of similar to the. I think it came out like around the same time. The Piranha remake.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that. I don't have the foggiest memory, so I don't remember details about it. The costumes looked better, but there was less action. There was a lot more talking. Yeah, the general tone of it was very much like toned down. I couldn't tell you like who got naked, if anybody got naked.
If it was a TV movie, I doubt it. It was probably implied nudity.
I think it was like Showtime because Showtime remade a bunch of these.
I do remember like there was. I do remember that there was implicit, scenes of them being like raped and whatever. Like they tried to like recreate the beach scene. I remember that they did that one, but you didn't see the girl run out naked. I like I said, I've seen it once and I don't remember much about it, but the one thing I do remember is that they spent a lot more money on the creature suits and they looked a lot better.
Nice. Yeah. At the very least, you got to do that. Definitely. I mean, especially if it's going to be a TV movie and you can't up the sleazy factor or the grindhouse factor. Yeah. Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if there was added story elements to that one. Like, who knows? Maybe they kind of leaned more into the environmental thing with that
beneath the surface.
I would have to go back and rewatch it. I will say this: it is an hour and a half, so I don't know, like specifically what was changed.
Gotcha.
But I would probably not even be I would not be surprised if this was actually closer to the original intent.
Nice. All right, folks. Well, that's about all I have on the movie. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my co-hosts one more time and see if they have any closing thoughts before we get out of here. So let me go to Derek first. Derek, any closing comments on Humanoids before we get out of here?
Yeah, it's fun. If you like fish rape and older men banging women and all that good stuff and ventriloquists, foreplay.
I gotta say though, man, the women in this town, like this is a fishing town, and we've got like some beautiful ass women here. Like, why are these women in a fishing town? And granted, it's not like there can't be good looking fishermen that would deserve a wife that looks like that, but the fishermen in this movie, I don't know. So many of them having young, good-looking wives. Like, obviously, it helps the narrative of the fish rape and, making all these women attractive. Obviously, that's more for us, the audience, because who wants to look at a, 45-year-old woman, getting raped by a fish when I could look at a 19-year-old girl getting raped by a fish? It's probably a little bit more appealing to most of the male movie watchers out there. So, yeah, what are you going to do? I'm sorry, Derek. Go ahead.
That's about it. It's good. It's a good movie. I like it. James Horner.
Nice. Love it. Yeah. And he did that score in 14 days. How impressive is that? I mean, even though it's not one of his best scores by any stretch, the fact that he did it in 14 days, that's impressive. So give him credit there. All right, Don, any closing comments before we get out of here?
Like I said, keep in mind that it's, not Schindler's List of creature features. It's just a fun, goofy, sleazy time. Although the one thing we didn't bring up is, similar to what we were talking about when we did Wasp Woman, about Corman's eye for talent. Like, look at all the people that had careers after this. So,
absolutely. No, and even the ones that didn't have careers, there were a couple of great performances. Like I said, Johnny Eagle, I don't know if we saw him in much stuff after this. I thought he did great. The Salmon Queen, like I said, I give credit for her performance, her badass little performance, definitely. Obviously, it's always great to see Ann Turkle, but yeah, I mean, definitely, Corman definitely has an eye for casting. I mean, that kind of goes across most of his movies, especially, well, maybe not especially, but I mean, his Hammer movies are, his Poe movies, I should say, are a great example of some of his awesome casting. So yeah, absolutely. Anything else, Don? I'm sorry.
No, that was pretty much it.
Awesome. All right, folks. Well, I think that's going to do it for episode 39 of Creature Comforts. Once again, this is Mr. Venom. Thanking you all so much for joining us. We hope to see you next month. Have not picked our movie for the next episode, but I'm sure we'll have something soon.
It's mine.
It's Derek's pick, so hopefully that'll be fun as always. Not that we ever make bad picks here, because even a bad creature feature is fun to watch. So,
Yeah.
All right, folks. So, like I said, that'll do it for episode 39. On behalf of Don Anelli and Derek B., I am Mr. Venom. Again, thanking you so much, and hopefully we'll see you next month for episode 40. Let's go ahead and say bye to the folks.
Salmon.
Later.
Salmon. Yes. Don't experiment on salmon. No good things will come from it. Take care, folks.